A very good day to you. I'm Howard Feldman, and this is a Synthesis podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Meagan Rabe. She's head of SME Lending and Strategic Alliances at Sasfin, and we are talking about the tenacity of South Africans. It's been a difficult few weeks as we come out of the third wave. We've seen a tremendous amount of unsettlement. I don't know, we call it all sorts of things. I think South Africans still searching for the perfect word to use. But either way, what we did see at the end of it was the triumph of normal South Africans. Meagan, good morning. Is this something that you are passionate about? Because that's definitely the sense that I'm getting.
Thanks, Howard. What a privilege to be talking to you today. And absolutely, I've gone through an emotional roller coaster, to be honest, as a proudly South African the last month, or maybe even longer, maybe it's even the last year, but particularly the last month. And as we went through those roller coasters of trying to think, I actually did say to somebody, there's almost like two voices in your head. And you hear the one voice to say, this is the beginning of the end. And then you hear the other voice that says, this is the start of the future. And as I saw that maturity thinking going across the last couple of weeks, I was amazed and so proud and realized this is the reason why I live in South Africa, is because of that tenacity of South Africans that really came through and shone and stood up for the greater good of our country, and very much focusing on how they themselves can better South Africa and better their workplace, grow their businesses and their staff. So absolutely, I'm very passionate about it. And very proud to be in South Africa at this point in time where we can actually all make a difference.
What to me a symbolic moment was the use of canola oil outside ShopRite Checkers to defend the store. And if that doesn't talk about the resilience, tenacity, and just slipperiness of survival in South Africa, well, I'm not sure what does.
No, absolutely. No, that was, and it's obviously spread far and wide in terms of the media. What was quite interesting to me at the time is I've got family members overseas, and they were like, well, should we be sending a plane to South Africa to rescue you?
Right,
yes. And then when you hear, like I was saying to him, of course, it's horrific in very circumstances. It's absolutely terrible. But so many people stood up. What I found in that week specifically is the amount of businesses that actually phoned me and entrepreneurs that phoned me for lending. You would have thought that people would put their heads in the sand and say, okay, well, I'm going to watch and play this out. But so many people looked for opportunities. I had people that were hustling. They did one thing and then all of a sudden they were in shop fitting.
That's amazing.
I had other people that said, okay, well, I've got a doctor's room in Alex that's been destroyed, but that's okay because I want to now create a mobile doctor's operation. And can you please finance me with assets? So I didn't speak to a single person that week that was in South Africa that said, I'm negative, I'm moving away from the situation. It was, I'm going to look at the situation and find the opportunity. And to me, that was just amazing to see. And that's where that tenacity comes through. And that's where the success of South Africa, I'm in those two voices definitely on the pages. This is the start of the next phase, the start of the next beginning. And with that, I was saying to a colleague of yours that my life motto is don't fear the future, but invent it. Right. And that's what we saw coming through in the last couple of weeks.
Well, an observation I made as well around this, when you talk about people inside and outside of South Africa, you saw a lot of people on Facebook with this hashtag Pray for South Africa. And I started to look at it. And although I think it came from a very kind and caring place, and I'm not doubting that for a moment, you saw a lot more from people outside of the country than inside of the country, because it was almost within South Africa. It wasn't about praying for South Africa. It was about fixing it, finding the opportunities. I mean, I was in the last couple of weeks on my show talking to people that were organizing these convoys down to Durban, and people organizing scripts for people. I spoke to the Pharmaceutical Association where they were finding ways to get, and it wasn't about simply praying for South Africa. It was actually finding solutions and finding the way forward for South Africa, which is quite different, actually.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the big sentiments as well is this was a time to act. This wasn't a time to sit back and watch. This was a time where I believe our children will say to us in years to come, what did you do at that moment in time? What did you do in the benefit of the people of South Africa? And a simple example of what we did at Sasfin is that on that Tuesday, we had a number of staff and clients that were sitting in the KZN area that, of course, couldn't get food and critical medicine. And we put a team together that actually operated and landed up finding the miracles of logistics and sending through like critical heart medicine, blood pressure medicine to people that were actually in that area. And the messages that came back from that, and like I said, that wasn't a publicity stunt. Like, that's not that you do this. That was genuine, like, people are in need and we have to act now. So yeah, absolutely, it's critically important.
So you're in the SME space, which in a way almost epitomizes this, because it's a space that requires, we use the word agility, but agility, tenacity, survival, looking at different opportunities. Take me through a little bit of your experience around what you've seen in terms of resilience and tenacity in the SME space.
Thanks, Howard. So I'm going to broaden the conversation not just to the last month, but actually through the COVID.
That's really what I wanted to talk about.
And one of the things that, again, is really coming through from a hustle perspective is at the start of COVID, so taking us back to March, April last year, had a number of businesses that would apply for lending. And if you applied your vanilla credit policy that was from the previous year, unfortunately, we wouldn't have been able to help because businesses change. And that is the reality of operating South Africa and this environment that we're operating now. People aren't profitable as they used to be. People don't have the massive cash flows that they used to be. Unfortunately, certain businesses have folded. Of course, we see stats that there's been a 40% increase in liquidation. So what we had to do is really look and talk to a lot of SMEs and understand what they're wanting, where they're going. And what Sasfin actually did is we partnered with the Dutch Development Bank last year, and we created a guarantee fund where we've got 650 million rand, which we need to disperse to SMEs that are COVID impacted or female-owned SMEs or youth-owned SMEs. And the youth is under 35. So I think Howard, sadly, you and I are out of that mix. But
just
next time. But in that, what we actually did is now we leveraging off of, obviously there's lots of rules, so it's not a free sure. But what we're doing is leveraging off of this guarantee to really push the boundaries of our credit policy in a controlled risk management framework. And with that, we have seen unbelievable growth potential for SMEs. So we have been able to fund catering businesses that weren't actually even, like, no one was looking at them. And again, that shifted and hustled their business. So they were used to catering for large events. Now what they do is they do home deliveries of frozen meals. We've adjusted to other businesses that obviously everyone was getting into sanitizer, etc. So all of those businesses that hustled and moved into that space. So really, from that perspective, is what big lesson that we learned last year is that we can't sit back and say, these are our rules, these are our frameworks. You have to figure out a way to comply. It was really listening to our customers and listening to our clients of what is happening in this space and how do we adjust as much as everyone else is adjusting. And that's really been a great opportunity for the last year and will put us in good stead for the future.
I would imagine. Do you think that this type of approach is here to stay?
I really hope so. I think that with the adjustments of technology, we've also built a machine learning scorecard in the last year that underpins all of this. So it's not just about the listening, it's really taking that and then converting it into the tech to support it. And if we as banks and financial institutions don't change the way we think about these things, I honestly think that we'll be at risk into existence into the future. We have to start embracing the new ways of working, the fintech almost mindset that approaches clients and putting the clients at the center and then designing solutions around the clients. Of course, being a bank is always difficult. It's I'm on the lending
highly
side.
regulated, yeah.
Yeah, I'm of course on the lending side, but you also want to, when you put in cash in the bank in a fixed deposit, you want to make sure that your money is good for it. So, of course, it's very much in our risk frameworks and very much regulated and controlled. And in South Africa, the banking industry is highly regulated, but you can still find a way to operate in that matrix as long as you're using the sounding guidance of governance as well as the technology. There's definite opportunities. So yes, Howard, it has to be here to stay. It has to be.
It's interesting because listening to you speak, it almost sounds as though it's actually become about community building. And when I talk of community, I speak about SMEs and maybe different types of communities, but the way you're referring to it from your perspective or Sasfin's perspective is almost building up these communities centered around their needs, requirements, nuances, and challenges. Is that the way you're seeing it? Because that's how it's sounding, which is amazing.
Of research over the last year where thousands of SMEs were interviewed. And what was very interesting is that a lot of people take information and knowledge from their societal communities. So, and it was very interesting to me specifically because like the idea of clubs or even churches or your local community being your mentor and the people that you go to for advice came very strongly through that. And as a result of that, we are actually looking at ways of how do you partner with these clubs or the churches or the communities to actually get the message across to SMEs that we're there to support. But in addition to that, what we're also looking at is really understanding what are the true needs for SMEs at this stage. So it's obviously funding, we understand, is a critical part, but it's that access to knowledge, access to markets and access to the information, and even knowing how to apply. Because again, last year when we were going through this change, we were looking at it through our lens, like you must have your financials, you must have this, you must have that. But people don't even know where to start. They don't know how to package these things. And it becomes quite daunting for a young SME to now be applying for a loan where you don't even know what the bank's asking you for. So we're really working on metrics of how do we share that knowledge and information, and also metrics on how do we support and grow SMEs. So if you're not ready for lending now, that's okay. We've got products that will nurture you through this. So for example, what we did is we developed a bank account, which is of course as vanilla as it comes, but on top of that bank account, it's got accounting light, for want of a better word, software over it, which would then almost package the information to a financier down the line when you are ready for lending without much effort from the SME.
So it's actually adjusting the needs and even education of the client, because you use the word nurture. You take your client through a maturity process in order to give them the skills to be able to get to the next level. Without those skills, it's virtually impossible to do that.
It's impossible, yeah. No, definitely. And there's lots of like incubators, accelerator programs. These are like all the buzzwords in South Africa. But which are great and they make a difference, but they're making that you have to be very lucky to get into those working schemes. So what we're really trying to do again is on the back of technology is to try and bring it more to the masses of how do we grow and as I say, nurture the clients.
Yeah, what are the biggest challenges that you've seen for these SMEs?
So one of the things that we often find, especially with a younger SME, is that they don't separate themselves from their business. And it's quite understandable and logical, but they don't. And then when they come and speak to a bank, like for example, when we're analyzing the credits, you'll see money comes into the business account, but then it goes and pays a home loan, then it's paying school fees, then it's coming back in. So one of the very big things that we often say to an SME is make sure that you separate, especially from an accounting or financial perspective, yourself from your business, and try and be very strict in that regard. That helps. And
I actually want to add to that, because it's so interesting. When I've often helped or mentored people in this situation, what I've noticed is it's a two-step process. They need to separate themselves, but they also need to have the business treat them with the same respect as they treat the business. And it's almost create this fiction of respect between these two entities, because if the business doesn't treat you with respect, then it's not going to be sustainable. So it's kind of finding that way.
I love that lens. That's very, very true. And then one of the other aspects that we often see, which we then struggle with, is it comes to that hustle that I'm speaking about, where someone will be like, okay, I'm going to go set up a business now. If it fails, it's okay. I'm going to close it down and I'll move on. But when you're looking at it from a financial perspective, you look at the owners and directors of the business and you look at their history, obviously the credit bureau data, etc. And if they've got lots of deregistered companies and that have got unpaids, etc., sitting in those spaces, the entrepreneur thinks, oh, but I've closed it. It's in my past. I've walked away from it. And it's very important for the SME to realize that how they operate on that level, you need to operate quite carefully. And on that point, I often also say is they should be checking their credit bureau status often, so that they can just check and make sure that if there's any unsqueakiness coming through, that they're looking at that coming through. And then another last point is really around those bank statements. I always say your bank statements are gold. And again, people don't see it like that. They're like a little piece of paper that I get at the end of the month that shows me money going in and out. But if you're monitoring your bank statements properly and you're actually focusing on making sure as far as possible that you've got limited unpaids going through, so like lapsed debit orders, as well as when an entrepreneur is focusing on their business, they're focusing on the front end of sales, but then sometimes not the best at focusing on collecting. And really making sure as much as the money's going out, the money's coming in. So bank statements are absolutely gold. So I think those are like three main challenges that we're seeing from SMEs.
Makes sense. But I do want to end it rather on a positive note. Tell me what excites you most about both the space and the opportunities in South Africa.
Wonderful. Thanks, Howard. So in terms of this space is that there is so much growth. The unemployment rate is obviously devastating, but one of the things that the unemployment rate creates is that people are forced into becoming business owners. It's not really like the past. Whereas as a result of that desire and need to have to do something, you really see the passion coming through. And if corporate South Africa, the banks, government, as well as entrepreneurs could actually all just sit around the table and focus on what their needs are, I think that there's going to be a true recipe for success there. But from an SME perspective, is that tenacity, never giving up, knowing that, okay, if something's not going to work, how else do I move to the next aspect, etc. That's really excites me. And then from a South Africa perspective, I've got the opportunity to have moved overseas. And I actually had said to my husband is that, why on earth would I go anywhere but South Africa? Because this is where you can actually make a difference. Why would I want to go and sit somewhere where it's very cold all the time? And there's lots of Meagans, there's lots of Howards, there's lots of all of these people, and you can't make the impact that you need to make. This is where we need to be, to act, to make an impact and transform South Africa. And I'm so excited about that.
Meagan, absolutely love that. Meagan Rabe, Head of SME Lending and Strategic Alliances at Sasfin. Phenomenal conversation. Absolutely love your enthusiasm. I love your approach, and it's certainly shared by us at Synthesis as well. Thanks for taking the time to chat to us, and thanks for taking the time to listen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you can be alerted anytime one of these podcasts become available. I'm Howard Feldman. This has been a Synthesis podcast. Be safe, be well, and God bless.